Hello again and welcome. My name is Kate and today I decided to make an elder brain and its little baby brains, the Intellect Devourers, into a diorama out of polymer clay. I hope you enjoy and let's get started. As I usually do, I start off with some foil for the base. I fold it into a rectangular sort of shape and also make sure that it's nice and layered so that it's not too flimsy later on when I add the clay. I smack it down with my fist to make sure that it's thin enough but still sturdy, and then I fold in the corners to give it an oval sort of shape. I place that to the side to start working on the brain, where I crunch 2 pieces of foil into 2 balls and then secure them with some extra foil so that they make the 2 halves of the brain. I then smack some clay to make sure that it's nice and soft so that when I go to roll it out later, it doesn't hurt my hands too much. I roll it thin as later on I'm also going to add some more clay onto the brain, so it doesn't matter that you can kind of see the foil through it. It's just there kind of so that there is clay on the foil. I also cut off all the excess clay and smooth it out with my fingers. Then, using the edge of one of my tools, I make sure that there is that kind of crease down the middle, and then I cut some wire to have the little tentacles coming out beneath the brain. Using this sharp tool, I poke in 5 holes beneath the brain so that these tentacles can fit in all nice. As they are all different lengths, I do need to bend them all at the same point while they're inside the brain, so that of course when I bend them and curl them all around into these sort of twisty tentacly kind of shapes, they all hit the ground at the same point, and so that the brain isn't uneven and unbalanced and is most likely to fall over. I then roll out some clay sort of as a thickness gradient, so the edge is thinner than the base, so that I can cut a line down the middle and then attach it to each of the wires to give them that tentacle sort of look. I don't really know what to call them because they're not really tentacles, but they're sort of tentacles, so I'm not really sure. More kind of like, I can imagine that they're tentacles, but they don't have the suckers on them. Strange, I don't know. I then attach them to the brain as I go along to make sure that they do all fit, as it does get a bit unbalanced at some point, so I do need to make sure that, you know, they all sit nicely. Like that, I bend them still even after I've added the clay on, which can smush the clay a little bit, but it's better than having to take the clay off, remove them, and then add the clay back on. I then blend them into the brain as well. Then I need to make 2 much larger tentacles that are going to be coming out the top of the brain. They're not perfectly even, I'm not trying to make them even, but they are a little bit thicker than the ones on the bottom, so I roll the clay a little bit thicker as well. Then, doing the exact same technique as earlier, I then attach them to the back of the brain and using more clay, I make sure that they don't fall off. And then again, I make some more little tentacles, using different thicknesses of wire this time. These ones are thicker, but then later on I do use thinner wire to make some smaller ones. These bits just kind of come out the bottom of the brain, sort of looking a bit wispy. Some of them are more like little veins that have kind of come off. It's kind of a bit gross, a bit disgusting, but that's fine. As the wire is a little bit smaller, I do need to use my pliers to bend them, as it can get a little bit difficult and hurt my fingers. And of course I coat them with clay like I did with the bigger ones. I tried to space them out evenly so that it kind of looks... I don't know how to explain this. I'm a very annoying sort of perfectionist, where if I have a bunch of things that are supposed to be random and, you know, a bit crazy, I try my best to make sure that they're in some sort of order, and then I fail and then it looks good either way, so I stress myself out for no reason. Learn from my mistakes, please. This is the smaller wire that I was talking about. It's very thin and quite delicate. I do not need to use pliers to bend it at all. I add probably around 30-ish. I might be completely overshooting that, but about probably 30 of these little tentacles all over the kind of bottom and this kind of sort of side profile of the brain. I do need to use some extra clay to attach them as well, as they won't sit nicely and will probably fall off later on. Then I go in with Cosclay. This, of course, like I've used before, it bends after it's been baked. This means that as it has a sharp tip, it won't snap off if you accidentally hit it or damage it. There is metal wire through it so that it doesn't, get too flimsy and so that it bakes more evenly. I had 5 of them onto each of the tentacles. Not the bigger tentacles, not the little ones on the bottom. Then using this spiky sort of tool, I give them a texture that's kind of lines running all the way through. It was a bit difficult deciding how to make the lines on the spikes on top, but I sort of did it in that sort of triangular way where it kind of goes up and then meets in the middle. Once I've finally finished that, I start to texture the tentacles. Now, it was a little bit difficult, however, I persevered. What I used was a ball tool and just kind of rapidly whacked it into the clay. This made it look a little bit scaly, a little bit bumpy. It's just a very nice sort of rough texture that I usually use for things like tentacles. Can you imagine the thousands of dots that I had to do to make all of this come together? Then I add some clay glue to the bottom of this foil, just so that the clay attaches nicely when I put it on top and so that it doesn't come off. I cut around the edges so that there's not really too much overflow, and then I blend it into the foil bottom. Then, using the clay at the bottom of the tentacles, you see that I didn't texture them at the bottom. It's because this clay is actually going to be used just to secure the elder brain to the base, so that it doesn't fall off later on. Once I've smoothed it all out, I use some more clay on top so that I can use it as the actual tentacle. I try not to make it too thick, but I kind of failed on this first one and then learned from my mistakes on the others to make them a little bit thinner. But yeah, I just use a little bit of clay, layer it on top, and then smooth it out with that sort of spiked tool. And then of course when that's done, I texture it the rest of the way down on each of the bottoms of the tentacles. Then I start to work on the brain texturing. It took me a little bit of time to figure it out, as brains are very strange looking. They're quite squiggly and they have a bunch of different ridges that are quite difficult to figure out, but in the end I sort of went with my own sort of design, tried to copy one and make it look like, a brain that I could use as a reference, but, I just ended up making my own pattern. I go in kind of, with this spike tool and carve in little bits that I can then texture later on. You see, I'm kind of doing a bit roughly. These are actually sort of guidelines for later on. You see what I'm doing now? Look at the right side compared to the left. the right side is very squishy looking. So I then go in on the left side and dig into the bits that I've made even deeper so that it looks more like, you know, the parts of the brain. And then I go in with some more Cosclay spikes and I put them in between the sort of crack of the brain in the centre. Of course, I do attach them with some more clay as well. I really think that I use my right side of the brain more. I'm not, you know, I know smart. I use my right side and, you know, have, you know, fun time. That part there is a foreshadowing to the events at which are going to happen later on, and you'll see. Stupid little crack. And then I go in and actually texture the real brain. Now, it's a bit difficult. You see, I'm doing a different texture here. It's not very effective. It doesn't do a lot. But then as I go on, I sort of make the texture better. And then, of course, I have to go back on that first texture. And I make it deeper. And I make it look more fleshy looking, like a brain. Pretty much I'm just ramming the tip of this into the clay, and it makes it, you know, and the harder you go, the deeper the texture goes. And then something very bad happens. I go away for the weekend and I come back to see that this entire tentacle has decided that it wants to just break off. So, to fix it, I cut it and then removed some of the clay that was sort of blocking the wire from going all the way into the foil. And then I put it back in, you know, try to make sure that it stays in place. You know, I lose one of the tentacles on the way, but I add it back later on. I use some extra foil so that it kind of holds its shape a bit better. And then I go over with the clay and then I texture it again. Then to work on the base, I use foil balls, kind of roughly making them into sort of random shapes, and dot them all about, and then coat them in clay. You can probably imagine what these are, but of course they are rocks that the little baby brains are going to be sitting on and playing around, and it's sort of just the environment around it. To make these rocks, you know, I blend it to the base. I don't split them, I don't make them like actual, you know, rocks that are sitting on the ground. They're more like the terrain, so they're more blended in instead of separated. You probably don't understand what I'm trying to say. I hope you do, but you know. Then I go in with my knife, as it has a very sharp flat edge that's kind of a bit of a different shape. I don't know. I go in and just go a bit crazy on the rocks. Now, there's no real way to do a rock. You know, there are a bunch of different types of rocks and they all look different, and each rock that you have that exists will look different to the next. So doing rocks isn't too difficult, in my opinion at least. And then I go in with some foil as well, just to put in that extra little bit of texture and also to smooth out anything that's a little bit too harsh. Then I start to work on the baby brains. So I start off with a teeny tiny little bit of foil, I put some clay over it, and then using that very thin wire that I was using earlier for some of the tentacles, I bend the little legs. The back legs are a bit more, I don't know how to explain it, bent than the front legs, and then I wrap it in a teeny tiny little bit of clay. And of course, I attached the legs, the front legs and the back legs. There is actually a front to it. If you look at one, sometimes you can't really tell what's the back of the front. Just look up which way the feet are facing. I'm waffling, I'm sorry. I then attach the feet. I blend them in, and then using one of my tools, I put in kind of 3 little toes, 3 little claws that you can find on them. You can't really find them because, you know, they don't actually exist. I wish they did. I would so keep one as a pet. And then I kind of just do the exact same thing as I did in the what's it called? The Elder Brain. With doing random squiggly lines all over it. Oh, it's so cute. Look at it. Oh, it's adorable. Love them. So I position them like that, and then I make them again. So foil, clay, bend the metal wire, put the clay on the metal wire, and then I attach the legs, blend the legs in, and add the feet, texture the brain, and then look, I got another little baby brain. That one's sitting like that. How cute! Sorry, you probably think I'm insane. I then use some of that clay glue to make sure that they do attach to that after they're baked. They don't just snap off randomly. There are 6 in total. I was only really planning on making like 3, but then I got a bit carried away. After the Elder Brain has been baked, I start to paint it. Starting off with this very, very dark grey on the base. Kind of looks almost black, but it's not quite black. It's kind of, very, very, very dark grey. Put it all over the rocks. Doesn't really matter how messy I get it, because it's the first layer of paint. I'll do touch-ups later. Then I go in with this sort of, you know, I only just realised I'm matching with my fingernails. Well, didn't mean to do that, but it's close enough. This sort of purpley, red, fleshy, disgusting sort of colour. I actually really enjoy this colour. It's not disgusting at all. But I put it on the tentacles all over, the little bottom ones and the big top ones, and then the little ones on the side, and all of the tentacles everywhere. I do need to make sure that I do get it into all of those little textures that I made earlier on, as it gets a bit difficult because, you know, paint is stubborn, and so are my paintbrushes. The paint doesn't want to go into the cracks, and the paintbrushes don't want to push the paint into the cracks. It's like lazy number 1 and lazy number 2. Then I go in with a lighter grey after the base has dried. Dry brushing, if you're, you know, if you've been here on my channel before, you probably know what dry brushing is by now because it's awesome and it's the best texture ever. Then I use a off black. It's not grey, but it's not black, and it looks much more black later on. Trust me, you'll see. Then I go with a sort of pinky colour. I don't really know what to call this colour because it's not salmon, not quite. You know, it's just brain colour, that's what it's called. And then I paint the little Intellect Devourers pretty much the exact same colour as they painted the Elder Brain as well. And then some more dry brushing, who would have guessed? You can't really tell right now that I've dry brushed, but then I go with an even lighter colour! Yay! And then, you know, I think you understand by now I'm dry brushing. I think it's the best texture for things that are, you know, random like this. Go with this very light colour. And then an even lighter colour after that. And of course the bigger tentacles too. I do make sure that there is a gradient on those black spikes on top. Again, they are black, trust me. After this is the stage where they look more black. I go in with gloss. It might just look like I'm tickling the baby brains, but no. There is a gloss glaze on that I use for the tentacles, the Intellect Devourers, and the brain itself. I kind of layer it up, making sure that it's nice and thick so that you can see how shiny it is. Look, watch as I put the gloss on the black. It gets pretty black. It makes the colour a lot more rich. That's, you know, a very good thing about using gloss. And of course, after it's completely dried, the Elder Brain and the Baby Brain Intellect Devourers are finished. This is the sketch that I did. I don't usually show off sketches that I do, but that's what I did. Tell me if it looks remotely similar to the plan that I had in mind. You know. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for sticking around this long. I'm so sorry if the audio's a little bit off this video. I don't know what happened. It's being weird. Also, I don't like saying this. It's my birthday coming up. And, you know, we're getting quite close to 1,000 subscribers. And I'm not going to tell you when my birthday is, but just try. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more, then subscribe. Don't just do it because I said so. And, of course, like the video too. I really hope to see you next time. Have a great day. Bye bye!